Hello, welcome to Brenda's Kitchen again in Midwest Illinois. Emily, this is from Mom to You, and today we're going to be making some potato soup. So I'm in the mood for something warm, and homemade potato soup, you just can't go wrong with that. And I'm again going to use the Weight Watchers What to Eat Now, because there's a recipe in here, potato lovers soup with crispy bacon. So we're going to give that a try. It calls for 3 large potatoes, 8 ounces each. It calls for 3 strips of bacon. And you know, bacon's really expensive right now and we don't eat that much of it. So instead of actually buying a big pack of bacon and frying up 3 strips, I just bought Hormel's real bacon bits. And so it sort of looks to me on the picture that it's like a garnish, and so that's what I'm going to use instead. And then 3 garlic cloves minced, and 4 scallions thinly sliced, and then 2.5 cups reduced sodium chicken broth. I didn't get the reduced sodium chicken broth because I was at Aldi and they're sort of a box store, and I just bought what was there. It says 99% fat free. I'm not as hung up on the reduced sodium, but if you've got high blood pressure or if sodium makes you retain water, then that's something you'll want to do. 1/4 teaspoon salt, a 1/4 teaspoon hot pepper sauce, and we had some on hand, so I already had that. And then a 3/4 cup fat-free half and half. So let's get started. It calls for the scallions to be thinly sliced, and this may be a baker's faux pas, but I use my butcher knife for a lot of things. I know that there's a slicing knife, but I just keep sharpening this knife and do a lot with that, and it just works for me. And now it calls for the garlic cloves to be minced, and I looked up minced to see what that meant, and it just means cut up in really teeny pieces. So I'm going to slice it like 4 or 5 ways lengthwise, and then I'm going to go the other direction, and I'm just going to keep going until I feel like it's really teeny. We're going to coarsely chop them, and coarsely chop them to me means no rhyme or reason, and you don't try to be neat about it. I don't like really huge chunks of potatoes in my potato soup, so I want it to be small enough. I don't want huge potato pieces. Some people, when they make homemade potato soup, they'll chop up a few pieces and puree one potato just so you have a little bit more sauciness to it. And I think what we're ready for now is to combine it into a pot and let it cook. Now, since I didn't fry up bacon, which it called for, it asked me to take the grease from after frying the bacon and put the green onions and the garlic in there and cook them until they're softened. But I didn't fry bacon, so I put a little olive oil in there, and I'm going to cook our vegetables, our garlic and our green onions in that instead. I think that'll work fine. And plus, like I said, I wasn't going to pay $7 for a packet of bacon. So I'm going to put this in the olive oil and put it on the stove, and we're going to let that cook up. One thing I will have to warn you about, I'm not a really neat cooker. We have an agreement in my household. If I do the cooking, my husband does the cleanup. I think that's a pretty good deal. And it says cook this over medium heat until the scallions or green onions, as I have, and the garlic are softened. It says about 3 minutes, and then so my vegetables have been cooking for 3 minutes, and they're softened. The scallions or green onions and the garlic. And now I'm going to add the broth. That's a 2 3/4 cup reduced sodium chicken broth. And then it calls for, a little too much, so I'm going to add some of that back in. 1/4 teaspoon salt and 1/4 teaspoon hot sauce. And if you like hot, feel free to add extra. Now we're gonna add the potatoes, and I was just reading the instructions again. It said to mash the potatoes with a spoon. So that's where remember I mentioned that, oops, some people puree them, maybe puree one of them and then put the other parts of them in chunky. See, I told you I wasn't a neat cooker. Let's see if I can mash some with a spoon. You know, I may have to bring them to a boil too and get them a little softer. I may not have baked them enough. You know, after boiling these a little bit, I really felt like my potatoes were too tough. So I went ahead and took about half of them out of the pot and put them into my little Ninja blender and pureed them. And I think that'll give it a nice, better consistency before I add the milk. Now that it's come to a boil and I've cooked it a little bit, added the puree potatoes in there, I'm going to add the 3/4 cup fat-free half and half. And the instructions say to bring it back to a simmer. It smells good. Now, to me, if you're used to thick potato soup, you might want to puree some of it a little bit more. It's more soupy than it is saucy. So I'm going to get out a 1/2 cup, and I'm going to measure out a 1/2 cup. And if you want your bowl to seem fuller, you might want to start with smaller bowls, but this is what we have, and I'm not going to go out and buy new bowls for this. It says you can garnish with a little leftover scallions from the scallions you cut. I didn't read my instructions thoroughly beforehand, so I used all my scallions in the recipe. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of bacon bits as garnish. Because again, I didn't fry the bacon bits. So I'm just using Hormel's bacon bits in the pan. And I think we're ready to sit down and eat here. I love you, Emily, from Mom to Emily across the miles, from Midwest to Fresno.